This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Morgan, editor of Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today, we're talking with Chris Orban, Vice President of Data Science at Trimble. Chris, good to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
No, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Always good to get a chance to just chat about what's going on in the data science world and transportation.
For sure. Video is a huge part of that. I know every time we get together, we always gravitate toward video. We caught up with you a couple weeks ago in writing on video, and I'm glad to connect with you here because there are a couple things that you had mentioned there that I wanted to follow up on. For anyone who might be confused, I'll put the link to that story below here in the post. But just to start off, something that you mentioned really caught my eye, and it was the idea of protecting drivers. And you said it in context of driver-facing cameras, right, which are the cameras that are inside the cab looking at the driver. We know that's controversial. We know that historically fleets, only a minimum number of fleets would really take that option. But you've mentioned seeing an uptick in that and kind of pointing to litigation. Can you kind of explain maybe what you're seeing, how are fleets starting to adopt that more, and what role is litigation playing in that driver-facing camera right now?
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting because, 15, 16 years ago when I started this industry, though there was some interest in, the forward-facing cameras, in many cases, driver-facing was just a non-starter, like just not even worth the conversation. If you were a vendor trying to sell that, don't even bring it up. If you were somebody trying to push that internally at a company, well, that's Big Brother watching me and all that kind of stuff. But quite frankly, I think the world has evolved in both positive and negative ways, such that driver-facing cameras are at least back on the table. And the positive ways that the world has evolved is that there are things we can do with the driver-facing camera to truly help the driver and to truly keep them protected from things that are adversarial to them. The fact, well, this driver must have been distracted when he took that action. Nope, he's got both hands on the wheel. He's got eyes straight ahead. There's nothing going on. Like, we can truly now prove via video that this driver is doing the right thing. And the negative side is what you touched on, which is these explosion of nuclear verdicts, as they're called, right? These huge settlements based on perhaps incomplete information. And so trucking companies are really starting to make the decision now to have all the possible tools in their arsenal to combat these, plaintiffs' attorneys and these things that are coming at them where everything is the driver's fault. Everything is the trucking company's fault. If they haven't done every single thing perfectly, then they should be paying tens of millions of dollars in settlement fees. And look, I think in my experience, most carriers are more than happy to take accountability for things that are their fault, right, but they need to know what's their fault. They need to know what really happened. And that's where the combination of forward-facing, side-facing, driver-facing cameras, where all that can be put together and combined with telematics data, combined with other systems that we have on the trucks right now to give you a full picture of what's really going on in the cab during an incident or something that happens where you might end up in court over.
Right, for sure. And, along those lines, something that you mentioned too, we talk about technology, and I think in the past 5-6 years even, I think the adoption of technology by fleets and drivers has accelerated considerably. If you remember the pushback even from like automated manual transmission years ago, right, which is a pretty straightforward technology now, and it's the makeup of builds. All these other layers of technology I think are being adopted fast, but this one, to me at least, still seems like you kind of clench up. I know there's the concern of Big Brother, right? Like, great, I want to be protected, but I don't really want to be monitored all the time with a camera in my face. And something that you mentioned in our Q&A was creating tools to protect the driver from that Big Brother feeling. What were you talking about there? What does that mean?
Well, and so what has become, I wouldn't say anything is necessarily easy in the, data science and machine learning world, but, machine learning algorithms that can actually blur the driver's face, that can actually detect certain behaviors that are going on in the cab and eliminate them from the record, or things that we just know we shouldn't record, and so we don't. So we can now time bound our videos. We can tie the video recordings to the activity that's going on based on the ELD data and things like that. So the driver can feel much more assured that they're not being watched 24/7 by this little, blinking security camera. It's a device that's only active when they are on the clock, when they're working, and even to some degree when they are taking actions that we want to help them with and help them improve. So, to your point around, acceptance of technology, I think now drivers are moving much more towards the, hey, why don't I have a mobile app on my phone when I'm, in the truck stop, eating my lunch, that tells me what's going on in the cab, that tells me when an order comes in, that tells me when I'm getting a message, like the kind of basic stuff you and I might take for granted, with our personal devices. The drivers don't always have those. We as vendors have got to get them some of these tools and get them these things. And I think that holistic view of technology supporting and helping the driver gets you to things like driver-facing cameras being more acceptable. And also, not to jump into a next topic, but what we do with the video is really important. So we are going to capture video, whether it's driver-facing or forward-facing or wherever. We're going to capture it. And then the next step is, what do we do with that? How do we prove to the driver that we're there to help them with it?
Right. No, two quick things there. I laughed when you held up the phone, and this is my own personal thing, but I do kind of laugh when people get nervous about privacy stuff, because we willingly pay a monthly fee to carry around a GPS enabled camera recording device on our person at all times. You know what I mean? And it's like, ooh, okay.
Absolutely. I am paying for the privilege to, in my case, give Verizon a ton of information about what I am doing, or quite frankly, over the last year, what I've not been doing very much of. But, this is the case, right? You're absolutely correct.
Right. So, so then, more to your point, and I was going to ask about this too, and I know this can get into kind of the more nitty-gritty technical stuff, but you mentioned the algorithms being able to detect the footage or recording footage. Okay, help me understand. I'm a driver. I'm driving. There's an incident. Let's say that'll trigger a recording. How do you enable that on your side? Like, how much of that is the algorithm, and then how much is actual human review of footage to teach the algorithms to do these things?
All right, let's geek out here. This is where I live my life. So what we are trying to do, and I believe, and I've seen the examples of us being able to do this with videos from trucks, is to move past what you describe of an incident occurs, maybe a hard brake or a following time violation, and the camera records something. And so that detects an incident, right? There's something that happens, so we detect that incident and we record it. And maybe we can apply some algorithms to that and say, okay, well, no, that wasn't actually a car in front of us. That was an overpass ahead, and the camera, the LiDAR might be slightly misaligned, and it picked up the overpass instead of the car or something like that. And we can flag that as a true positive or a false positive, that sort of thing. That's pretty basic in my mind. That stuff exists already. We've already got that. Mm-hmm. What I want to move us towards, and what I'm seeing success in, is action detection. So rather than say, hey, you had a hard brake event and we recorded a vehicle in front of you, I want to capture the action of that vehicle coming up on our left-hand side that we saw through our left-facing camera, cutting in front of us without signaling. Then we have the action of the driver hitting the brakes, the following time distance system firing, those two things happening, the camera recording, and then this car veering off to the right and taking the exit that your driver was, again, in the right-hand lane, doing everything right, obeying the speed limit. That driver just had two safety events that in the traditional world, you might review manually and say, hey, man, you've got to be a little bit better, be a little more cautious, maintain your following distance. When really what that driver did is probably avoided an accident, and certainly avoided putting other vehicles in an unsafe situation by deviating from his lane or getting angry and, following this driver and yelling at them or something like that, which, again, having learned how to drive mostly in the Boston area, it is very tempting to be sometimes. But that action detection, I think, is truly the next step in these algorithms and in these safety systems. So if we can detect the action that is behind the scenes, then we can coach on it. And if we can coach via automated systems to every driver in the fleet every day, wow, that's really powerful. And I'm not saying we remove the human from it. There certainly would be still instances where we would want to flag a certain type of behavior or repetitive behavior, or we might want to have a manual intervention. But what's exciting to me is now we can use this technology to coach drivers on positive behavior, as well as the traditional, hey, look, I'm a safety manager. I've got, 500 drivers in my fleet. I've only got, enough time to make 5 or 6 calls today. They're all going to be negative calls, right? They're all going to be the guys who I'm worried about having an accident. That's appropriate. But if we have these machine learning driven systems, the systems that can detect the driver's actions and the good and bad behavior, well, then we can give the driver that kudos, that hey, this is a great thing you did. You probably saved a life. And we can record that. And then this becomes a positive mark for a driver instead of just these negative marks that I think we tend to give them now.
Right. That always seems to be the hardest part of technology, like people using it. The technology can work, but people working together to demystify it, talk transparently about it, right? Because cameras aren't going away. I mean, I was in the new Peterbilt 579 model not too long ago, and they will have rear view camera systems, right? Which give you great visibility, and now you have another video system where you can see that car weaving lanes behind the truck and then coming up, catching your side camera. I mean, you would be able to recreate the entire event around.
You make a really good point there. So we think about action detection in terms of our drivers, the ones behind the wheel, detecting that driver's action, but we're really detecting the action of the entire set of traffic around the driver, the entire environment around the driver. What if the action that we are detecting is a road starting to be covered with snow? And then we can send alerts to the driver to say, hey, it looks like, based on the temperature sensor, based on the video we're seeing out the front of your truck, based on the prevailing traffic conditions around you, that we would like you to consider shutting down, or let's not worry about getting this load there. We'll call the receiver, let them know you're going to be a couple hours late. Let's keep you safe. Let's get you to a safe haven. That sort of thing. At the same time, maybe we can say, hey, we've seen from other vehicles on the road that the roads are clearing, that this accident that we've had you, waiting and getting some rest at a truck stop has cleared, and now traffic is moving quickly. Let's go ahead and get back out on the road. We can help you. It's funny, we talk about technology. We can help the drivers in our commercial vehicles do what we do in our personal vehicles all the time. Run something like Waze, look at traffic, look at predictive weather conditions and stuff like that.
Right. No, and what this conversation really brings to my mind too. I mean, we have a lot of these conversations when we start talking about autonomous technology, and that kind of stuff. But even then, the understanding that the technology is being developed and it's here to help people, because we're going to have drivers in trucks for a long time here going forward. Self-driving trucks aren't just going to show up. So harness what we got now and make it better.
I'm certainly not the first person to talk about it in this way, but I believe that autonomous vehicles will transform the driving job, not eliminate the driving job by any stretch of imagination, but certainly, in the medium term, the driving job becomes much like an airline pilot. You are doing that really, really complex task of, making sure that you're in the right loading area and in the loading dock and navigating, the distribution center and getting out, through traffic in a city to the highway. And then maybe you can engage some of these autonomous systems and the vehicle will do the heavy lifting on the driving then. And maybe you can actually, depending on, what regulations are and things like that, maybe you can actually take your attention off the road and, read or do other things. And the driving job doesn't become it doesn't stay kind of as stressful and as specialized on that just holding onto the wheel as it is now. It's much more around the skills you have to navigate these particular circumstances, like an airline pilot does, like being ready to engage during a critical situation, or when weather changes, or when traffic changes, things like that.
Right. Or even communicating with customers and, your drop-off destination, that kind of thing. Okay, I'm going to take a quick left turn here because there was one more thing that you mentioned that I wanted to get to: algorithms as a service. Okay, so you gave us a little insight into what that is in the Q&A. Can you kind of give me an example of how that would work in regard to this conversation? Let's keep it driver focused, right? So I want to improve my driver training. How would algorithms as a service work in that regard?
Sure. And so the general concept of algorithms as a service is you as the customer, and the customer can be a shipper, a carrier, or a driver, or a warehouse. It can be anybody, maintenance worker. It can be anybody. It can be a fueling stop, right? wants to ask a question that has a data-driven answer. And so these algorithms live in the cloud. They are accessed via either the onboard computer, they can be accessed via a personal device, they can be accessed via a back-end system. So in our case, the algorithm as a service that we're talking about is truly this evaluation of the safety situation and the driver's behavior to produce a coaching plan for each driver. So that's an actual algorithm as a service that is in effect right now. Trimble Dispatch Advisor is another algorithm as a service. It doesn't matter what TMS or telematics hardware you're using. If you want to match your orders to your assets and get an optimized solution based on your parameters, you can pass in those orders and those drivers to that algorithm, and you'll get a result set back. We don't care where the data is coming from. Similarly, if you move down, further kind of down the driver path and think about tools we might build for them, like a predictive weather routing system, where a driver can actually say, oh, hey, I'm trying to get from the port of LA to Boston. Well, my original route was through the western part of Pennsylvania, but there's this snowstorm that's going to pop up there in 2 days. Let me go south of that, and let me have the algorithm push to me the route I need, but also to my back office the reason for this change and the authorization to do the extra 100 out of route miles, which again are actually going to save me money at the end of the day, because I'm not going to get stuck and laid over for 2 days in a snowstorm in Pennsylvania.
Right. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. And so that would be, I mean, so you don't even have to have, as you said, you don't even have to have Trimble as a service. It's just a service that you can kind of plug your data into, and it gives you the answer, right?
I'm wearing my Trimble shirt, but
I know. So I'm just saying, for those who might not have Trimble.
But you're exactly correct. And so that's something that on the data science side, we have really worked hard. We are completely hardware and software agnostic with all of our solutions. Now, I've got to make the pitch, which is if you do have Trimble hardware and Trimble software and use Trimble maps, the solutions will be easier to integrate and will be more flexible and more complete. And one example that might be on the predictive weather routing system, you might be able to do a dynamic reroute with a piece of Trimble onboard hardware, Trimble telematics device. Whereas if you had, some other service, that might just be a static route you get one time, just because of the way integration works and security and permissions and stuff like that. So, again, we would love people to be part of the Trimble ecosystem, but I also realize that there's a lot of different vendors out there who do a great job to serve the industry, and I think we want to be the again, algorithm as a service, the machine learning engine in the cloud. We want to be all the fancy buzzwords you can think of, but that truly do perform these tasks and solve these problems for our customers.
Right. Well, and you mentioned the increased communication, getting approvals for these kind of things, dispatching. Clearly, you need to be on the Trimble platform to integrate that kind of thing and streamline that. Otherwise, it's just kind of like a answer to your question that kind of shows off the algorithm power that you have there.
That's exactly right. And I think there's value in that. Again, I'm not saying that everybody has to be on, the full Trimble suite of products. We just want to show you the advantage of being on the Trimble suite of products. And, if we can show you that and we can show you the value, great. And if not, then hey, we've still got solutions for you.
Right. No, very cool. Chris, I appreciate you taking the time here to go over all this. Always great catching up with you. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much for your time.